The term effectiveness may seem self-evident, may seem so clear-cut, it doesn't really need any further explanation or clarification. But it's not quite as simple as that. Language rarely is. Let's first of all take the distinction between efficacy and effectiveness. Incidentally, this is an academic distinction in Italy because there is no separate word for efficacy and effectiveness. But in English, efficacy and effectiveness. One approach is to say that efficacy is the results of an intervention in the research setting. Effectiveness is the result in an ordinary service setting. I once said, rather cleverly I thought, but of course completely unconsciously, that a cancer treatment was efficacious if there was a paper in the New England Journal of Medicine describing that it worked in the Sloan Kettering Center in New York, but it was effective if there was also a paper showing that it worked in Kettering, Northamptonshire, England. Efficacy and effectiveness. Not everyone actually likes this definition. Indeed, Archie Cochrane, in his landmark book called Effectiveness and Efficiency, wrote about it in this way, and I'll quote, and for once, my accent is not too bad for the purpose, because Archie Cochrane was a Scot. And he wrote in his book, "There are two preliminary steps which are essential before cost-benefit approach becomes a practical possibility. And it is with these two steps that I am chiefly concerned. The first, of course, is to measure the effect of a particular medical action in altering the natural history of a particular disease for the better. Since the introduction of the randomized controlled trial, our knowledge in this sphere has greatly increased, but it is still sadly limited. It is in this sense I use the word effective in this book, and I use it in relation to research results, as opposed to the results obtained when a therapy is applied in ordinary clinical practice in a defined community. Some people would like to use the word efficacious for this measurement. This seems reasonable, but as I do not like the word, I have not used it here." Wonderful, typical Cochrane approach. So, efficacy and effectiveness. So we're all clear what effectiveness means. Except that the word effectiveness can be used in many different ways. For example, I might use the word effective, meaning that it's been shown to be effective in an ordinary service setting in a randomized controlled trial. For example, an intervention that 5 hospitals undertook to do, and there were 5 hospitals as a control group. But there's a couple of weaknesses with this. Firstly, we're now pretty clear that single trials are not reliable measures of effectiveness, with a very few exceptions. The massive trials carried out by Richard Peter and Rory Collins, for example, you can rely on them. Big, simple trials. But there are some people who argue that it's not even worth bothering about the power calculation of a single trial, because all trials, with a few notable exceptions, are too small. Alright, let me reframe it. I could say that an intervention, a medical action in Cochrane's term, was effective if a systematic review of all randomized controlled clinical trials came to this conclusion. And that sounds very defensible. But it is, of course, an epidemiological approach. A clinician might say, this treatment is effective because I did it on a patient last week and the patient got better. I cannot deny that clinician's experience. A patient might believe that something is effective because of their experience. When I was running the national screening programs, one of the toughest battles I had was the battle about prostate cancer screening. And I never met a man who'd had a PSA test and was still alive who did not believe that the fact that he was still alive was due to the PSA test. My elegant epidemiological arguments cut no ice at all. So, we must accept that statements about effectiveness made by people like me have a value element as well as a scientific element. people did say to us, so the reason that you've no evidence of effectiveness of breast cancer screening in women under 50 is simply the trials are too small. You haven't shown an effect because you have done too small an amount of research. There's another problem, of course. The word effectiveness implies good effects. But there are also bad effects of interventions. But when we talk about something being effective, it implies that it is universally a good thing to do. For this reason, Dave Sackett, when he was director of the Centre for Evidence-Based Medicine in Oxford, came to the conclusion that the word effective was now causing more confusion than clarity. And, Wittgenstein would have been proud of him, decided that he wouldn't use it anymore. And he talked about the likelihood of being helped to being harmed, the LHH ratio. So for any treatment that I'm offered as a patient, I'd like to know the likelihood of being helped to being harmed. There we are then. Effectiveness seemed quite a simple thing. I actually try not to use that term anymore, and I always talk about the probability of being helped, or the probability of being harmed, or, in population or management terms, the numbers of people who will be helped and the numbers of people who will be harmed.